this morning. So thanks for being here.
Let love and faithfulness never leave you. Bind them around your neck. Write them on the tablet of your heart. Then you will win favor and a good name in the sight of God and man. Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways submit to him, and he will make your paths straight.
Good morning. So good to see you. Good to be together, as Wes said, particularly if you're new at Hope. We're really glad you're here, and we hope you're encouraged by being here today. So it's the new year, right? I wonder how you're feeling at the beginning of the new year. And you might say, how am I feeling about what? Well, I'll leave it as general as that. How are you feeling at the beginning of the new year? Usually this is a time when there are lots of voices that are telling us about resolutions that we should make, goals we should set, priorities we should clarify. And all of that is good, I think. I've learned that our own different personalities have different ways of wording and nuancing all that stuff. Some of us are committed to do more of fill in the blank, more of X, less of Y. So all of this are the multitude of voices around us on the internet, social media, podcasts, posts, that basically say this is how you live a good life. And if you want to have a good life, you should do these things. In the Bible, there is one clarifying thing that is elevated above everything else. And one of the things that I have learned about the Bible over many years of studying it is the Bible is usually quite shy about superlatives, about statements of magnitude, about the stuff of life. But it's not shy on this issue. What the Bible says is, if you want a good life, get wisdom. Above all else, get wisdom. And the book of Proverbs says it that clearly, that way, numerous times. Above anything else, any other priority, any other concern, any other focal point of your life, get wisdom. It is the most valuable thing that we could have in our lives. The Bible's very clear about this, which gets my attention because usually the Bible is quite reticent to have these sort of superlative kind of statements. If you get anything, get wisdom. It's the most valuable thing. More valuable than money, more valuable than gold, it's going to say, silver, rubies. It's the most valuable thing we can get. It's that thing we should pursue above anything else. Not only that, it's the foundation of everything else. Right? You see it because wisdom becomes like the trunk, the root system of the tree of our lives, and all the branches of lots of experience and insights and how to do this and how to make this kind of choice and what direction to take our lives. It all grows branching out from the core issue that's wisdom. So wisdom is like the foundation of all this other meaningful stuff. As Wes mentioned, 31 chapters in the book of Proverbs. It's almost like coincidence that this is designed for us to read a chapter every day of a month and maybe keep doing it over and over and over and over again, month after month after month. It's like a perfectly written and composed devotional book that matches up with the days of the month. Okay, so let's get a little framework. In Proverbs chapter 1, verses 1 and 3, this is our teeing up of what Proverbs are all about. It says, these are the Proverbs of Solomon, David's son, king of Israel. Their purpose is to teach people to live disciplined and successful lives and to help them do what is right and just and fair. How about that? Very clarifying. Okay, now a couple little comments on this. Their purpose is to teach people to live disciplined and successful lives. Okay, you know that when it says successful life, it does not have like the American dream in mind. Proverbs were written like 1000 BC. They don't know anything of a place called the United States of America. They don't know anything about the American dream and can you buy a house and what are mortgage rates doing and all of that jazz. They don't know anything about that. When the Proverbs are talking about success, it's not talking about money. It's not talking about a successful career, corner office, executive suite, climbing the ladder, all that jazz. It's not what it's about. When the Bible talks about a successful life, it's talking about a life of meaning, contribution, value, honoring God. That's what the Bible is talking about when it talks about a successful life. Okay, so the purpose is to teach us that, a successful life, a disciplined life. A disciplined life. You've probably heard it, but a lot of people are calling our times the age of distraction. And with distractions, we're just prone to go in so many different directions. It's so hard to stay the course and stay focused for a purposeful, meaningful life. There's so many things out there. So their purpose is to help us live a disciplined, I think you could add focused, successful lives to help us do what is right and just and fair. How interesting. Particularly in our day, with all of the debates about what is right and what is fair and where is justice. The Bible's telling us, the book of Proverbs teaches us how to live those kind of lives. Okay, so what we're going to do in this series, each week we're going to read a full chapter. It takes a little bit of time. It invites you to kind of stay with it as I read it. But in a sense of deciding to do that, because it's kind of part of the point. We're used to skimming in life. Give me snippets, give me tweets. And we're going to soak in this a little bit. So I'm going to read the full chapter 3 and invite you to try to hear it and take it in. My child, do not forget my teaching, but let your heart keep my commandments. For they will add length to your days, years, and peace to your life. Never let loving devotion or faithfulness leave you. Bind them around your neck. Write them on the tablet of your heart. Then you will find favor and high regard in the sight of God and man. Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he will make your paths straight. Be not wise in your own eyes. Fear the Lord and turn away from evil. This will bring healing to your body and refreshment to your bones. Honor the Lord with your wealth and with the first fruits of all your harvest. Then your barns will be filled with plenty, and your vats will overflow with new wine. My child, do not reject the discipline of the Lord, and do not loathe his rebuke. For the Lord disciplines the one that he loves, as does a father the son in whom he delights. Blessed is the one who finds wisdom, the one who acquires understanding. For she is more profitable than silver, and her gain is better than fine gold. She is more precious than rubies. Nothing you desire can compare with her. Long life is in her right hand. In her left hand are riches and honor. All her ways are pleasant, and all her paths are peaceful. She is a tree of life to those who embrace her, and those who lay hold of her are blessed. The Lord founded the earth by wisdom and established the heavens by understanding. By his knowledge the watery depths were broken up, and the clouds dripped with dew. My son, do not lose sight of this. Preserve sound judgment and discernment. They will be life to your soul and adornment to your neck. Then you will go on your way in safety. Your foot will not stumble. When you lie down, you will not be afraid. When you rest, your sleep will be sweet. Do not fear sudden danger or the ruin that overtakes the wicked, for the Lord will be your confidence, and he will keep your foot from the snare. Do not withhold good from the deserving when it is within your power to act. Do not tell your neighbor, come back tomorrow and I will provide, when you already have the means. Do not devise evil against your neighbor, for he trustfully dwells beside you. Do not accuse a man without cause when he has done you no harm. Do not envy a violent man or choose any of his ways, for the Lord detests the perverse, but he is a friend to the upright. The curse of the Lord is on the house of the wicked, but he blesses the home of the righteous. He mocks the mockers, but gives grace to the humble. The wise will inherit honor, but fools are held up to shame. So it was probably about 15 years ago, and I received an invitation from a church to come for a couple of Sundays as a guest preacher during the month of February. It so happened that this church was in the Caribbean. So I prayed briefly about it, and I went. It's all about obedience. It's all about obedience. And I was down there for about 10 days, 2 Sundays in the midst of the 10. And one evening I was having dinner with an elderly couple, just me and the elderly couple. They'd invited me. They're part of this church. In this beautiful setting, I remember it so well because it was such a special, magical evening. And the windows are open and this breeze is coming through. You can hear it rustling the palm trees. The moon is shining on the water. We had this lovely dinner, just getting to know each other. And we talked for a couple of hours. And after a while into the dinner, I said to them, at your age and stage of life, what's something that you have learned that as you look back, it's become a point of wisdom, a point of reference for you? And they were quiet for a minute, and then the gentleman said to me, if I could do it over again, I would have taken more risks. So interesting to me, and you can tell, right? I've never forgotten it. I asked him to say more about why, and he said, because decades ago when I looked at certain things, they seemed so foreboding and so scary. And he said, at this stage, from my perspective, I see it quite differently. I would have taken more risks, he said. So in Proverbs chapter 3, verses 5 and 6, which will be my focal point, we read this. Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he will make your paths straight. So here's a really valuable question in life. I think it's one of the more important things we could ask ourselves. What are you placing your trust in? What are you trusting as a pillar, a foundation for your life and the way you live it? Sometimes it's not always easy to know that. One thing I've learned in life is if I experience a disproportionate amount of disappointment over something, I was probably putting too much trust in it. And so this question about what do you put your trust in is a really valuable question. I think most of us in our culture, I think we put our trust in our money. And our trust is more money means a better life. We may put our trust in climbing the ladder with job, ascendancy. We may put our trust in politics. It'll be an interesting year, right? The election in November, we're probably in for some interesting surfing. If you trust in the election or you trust in the politician, I just think we'll learn that we had put too much trust in something that we shouldn't. These other things are part of life, and yes, they're valuable, but what happens is we misplace them from where they are intended to lie into something that they can't hold up. So in our culture now, everybody knows, right? We've come to the point where we've lost trust in seemingly everything. We've lost trust in government, we've lost trust in Congress, we've lost trust in the church, we've lost trust in the media, we've lost trust in colleges and universities. It's the great deconstruction is what people call it. And whether we know it or not, the default, if we do jettison all those things, is to leave us trusting only ourselves. In other words, well, in this big confusing world where I can't trust any of that, then I can only trust myself, I guess. But for me personally, that would be a no. Trusting myself, I have such limited knowledge. I have such limited capacity. I have fickle emotions. I have a variety of impulses. And if I decide that I'm just going to trust myself, I'll be the result of all of those limitations. So even though it might feel like the logical result of not trusting all these other what seem to be untrustworthy places, you got to trust only yourself, I think we'll find that even that's not a good idea. Here's what I would ask of anything that I'm considering trusting in. What is the character of the thing or the person? What is the intent of the thing? How much knowledge does it or he or she have? How much power to control or influence? If I ask that question and I compare God or me, well, then that's going to say you got to put your trust in God. Because only his character is morally spotless. Only his intentions and motives are purely love. Only he has all knowledge of all things throughout all time in every moment. And only God has all power. So I'm going to be on a much better track if I choose to trust him than trust me. So this phrase, and lean not on your own understanding, effectively that's saying, don't trust myself. I've got thoughts about life, I've got thoughts and expectations, which is a huge part of it. But what the Bible is saying is trust in the Lord with all your heart. And don't lean on your own understanding. Don't lean on trusting yourself. No, him. And so this is an invitation to come closer and closer to God as the foundation of my life. The foundation, the thing that holds it all up and holds it all together, and from which all the rooms are built. Okay, so throughout the book of Proverbs, you have a whole host of times where you get a comparison between the wise person and the unwise person. Sometimes the unwise person is called the fool, which is kind of a hard word to use, but the Bible speaks of the wise person or the unwise or the fool, and frequently will sort of set them up against each other. What will be the difference in the life and the outcomes between a wise person and an unwise person? Or maybe another way to look at this that would be more helpful personally to each of us is, how would it go if you compared the wise you versus the unwise you? Like, how would life go? All other things being equal, if you had wisdom and you navigated your life accordingly, or if you didn't and you navigated your life that way, what would the differences be? Generally speaking, the unwise makes poorer decisions, is ignorant of the outcomes of the way things will go, where they'll end up, what they will lead to. The unwise is more inclined to live a superficial, surface-distracted life as compared to a focused life of purpose and meaning and particular value. Without understanding the purpose and the design of life, we're prone to miss it. You know this, it's possible to live 90 years and completely miss the point. Never really understand how this life works and where the value and the meaning and the beauty and the goodness is. And part of that is because there are so many voices calling us to give our devotion to them, and many of them are false promises, mirages that look like they'll quench our thirst, but when we get there, we find that it wasn't there at all. Without understanding the purpose and the design, we get various axioms in American life, various words that are supposed to be words of wisdom, but probably aren't so much. Like, words of wisdom in American culture are things like, you be you. Just be a loving and kind person. So, in his commentary in the book on Proverbs, Ray Ortland says it this way. He says, if we have love but not wisdom, we will harm people with the best of intentions. If we have courage but not wisdom, we will blunder boldly. If we have truth but not wisdom, we will make the gospel ugly to other people. If we have technology but not wisdom, we will use the best communications ever invented to broadcast stupidity. The word wisdom in Hebrew, like a lot of Hebrew words, has this very rich soil to it. A root aspect of it is it means to divide. But let me explain. When I mean divide, not like to split something in a destructive way, but more like to be able to discern between the good and the bad. So if you're presented this big confusing picture, wisdom has the capacity to discern in that big confusing picture between what's good and what's bad, what's a good idea and what's not a good idea, what's right and what's wrong. And in our day of moral equivalency and this big confusing world, wisdom could perhaps be more important and valuable than ever. To discern good from evil and to be able to divide out with discerning perspective. And wisdom, all things being equal, will provide better outcomes. Now, please hear me. It doesn't mean it's always going to go great. It doesn't mean that the wise person is exempt from pain and grief and loss. But on balance, over the long haul, apples and apples comparison, the wise person will have better outcomes than the unwise person. And so what we begin to realize is we're being invited to this depth of relationship with God, and wisdom, one of the most significant aspects of it is it has a prophetic capacity. Wisdom has a sense of being able to see how this is going to go in the future. Wisdom has a sense of looking at something today and knowing what this tends to lead to down the road. And so wisdom becomes an enormous help in our lives. Without it, we will operate on emotion and impulse. Somebody's written, to understand human beings is to know that we are not creatures of logic, but of emotion. And we will operate out of emotion and impulse if we don't have wisdom. Effectively, in our culture, that axiom is this: if it feels good, do it. You know that animals operate on emotion and impulse. They don't have wisdom or discernment. And so effectively what it means is, without wisdom operating on emotion and impulse, we will be more like animals as compared to what God intends us to be as human beings. So as we embark on the journey of wisdom, it's really important to know that this is not about being smarter. This is not about education. It's not about gathering more and more and more knowledge. It's much more about understanding. So for instance, we could have two people. One's a PhD from Harvard, and one is a grandma in Iowa who has an 8th grade education. And the grandma in Iowa has 10 times more wisdom than the PhD from Harvard. It's not about smarter, it's about understanding and humility. James Robinson writes, most of our so-called reasoning consists in finding arguments to going on believing as we already do. Meaning that we are driven by emotional commitments to what we believe, so most of our efforts to learn more are to reinforce our currently held emotional commitments. But they may or may not have any wisdom to them. They will have a lot of emotion to them. So let's take a look at how we begin to go into this journey of wisdom. Proverbs 4:7 has this incredibly, it's almost amusing statement. The beginning of wisdom is this: get wisdom. Right? Like the beginning of wisdom, this is how you know that you're beginning to get wise. You know you need to get wise. It's true. It's really almost funny. You're like, Solomon, did you intend that to be a joke? Well, it's a truth that's got some humor with it. The beginning of wisdom is this: get it. That you've got a thing in you that says, I need to get this. That's how you know you're beginning to get wise, or you're on the road. The wise person with regard to wisdom says, I need it. The fool disregards it. The fool has placed themselves above all of this. The fool sees themselves as the great knower and the great controller. And the wise person knows that they need wisdom. So when we get to Proverbs 9:10, we're now given an insight about wisdom's source. Fear of the Lord is the foundation of wisdom. Knowledge of the Holy One results in good judgment. Other English translations say, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. Okay, yes, now this starts to make sense, right? Because if God is the one who knows everything, if God created everything in life, if God holds the blueprints to the entirety of it in his hands, if that's who God is, and he has written the design of life and the intentions of life and his intentions for us as human beings, then if we want to know how to do it, we want to know him. We want to know him. Understanding the design and the intent of something is really important. If you don't understand the purpose, the design, the intent, then we'll misuse something. And sometimes that can lead to a lot of destruction. I have a good buddy who just had knee replacement surgery. And I just saw him yesterday, and I said, how's it going? And he said, it's going great. This is his second one. He had one done last fall, and he had the other one done just recently. And I said, you got all the staples in there still? And he said, no, it's glue. And I'm like, really? Let me see. And so, of course, he had sweatpants on, pulled them up over his knee, of course, you see his swollen knee, and you see that scar. And I thought, a surgeon used a scalpel to make the incision to get in there to do this repair and this healing. A scalpel, presumably, is really sharp. Used for its intended design and purpose, it becomes a healing instrument. But if you take a scalpel and you don't understand the intended design and purpose and you wield it foolishly, it would cause a lot of pain and hardship. And so understanding the design and the intention is very, very important. And here we're being invited to know the designer who gives us the invitation to wisdom. Okay, so what's a huge dilemma for us human beings? We're all in this together. A huge dilemma is that we don't know what we don't know, right? It's just like, how can you know what you don't know? Well, when you're starting to get smart, you're realizing you don't know what you don't know. When you're starting to get wise, you have begun to realize you're not very wise. And what you realize is there's so much that you don't know So now wisdom is a person who knows that there's so much that they don't know. And the wise person becomes a humble student who wants to learn. The foolish person doesn't know that they don't know what they don't know. But the wise person does. And you know what's interesting about wisdom and the advice and the insight of wisdom? It only really becomes meaningful to us with experience. All of these words, they're kind of nice. They seem like the kind of stuff you would put around your house or on a bookmark or something like that. But often we don't really understand the point. They only become very alive to us when they are baked in experience. C.S. Lewis was once asked, "Isn't it true that experience is the best teacher?" And he said, "Only for people who are determined to be its student." In other words, you can go through lots of experiences and not really give much consideration, not give much consideration to where might I have erred or made a mistake, what is there for me to learn, where could I learn and grow from this. You can just cruise through and not pay much attention to experience. But wisdom only becomes really actualized for us when it's baked in our experience. Every one of us when we were teenagers, call it 17 years old, had a mom or a dad who gave us words of wisdom. And to us, we sat there and our folks talked to us and it was blah, 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 blah. And then 10 years later, we're in a really rough patch. And we made a couple decisions that didn't lead to good places. And lo and behold, we remember that night 10 years prior. And now we say, now I know what she meant. Now I know why she told that to me. The sayings in the Proverbs, they're all quite simple, actually. I was thinking in an odd way, the sayings in the Proverbs don't really need me or our staff to teach them. They're very simple. They're not hard to understand. They don't need explanation, they need experience. And they need humility to take them in. But please be sure as we go on this journey that the pursuit of wisdom does not mean we will have lives without hardship. We will have lives that are exempt from grief and pain and difficulty and loss. Doesn't mean that. But it does talk about the quality of our life experience in the macro big picture. Apples and apples, the wise versus the unwise. The wise will have a quality of life that is very different. We would like it always to be good and happy and joyful. But it won't always be that way, even for the wisest. Helen Keller, we all know who she is, said this: "We could never learn to be brave and patient if there were only joy in the world." So what the Bible is telling us is, this is like a little insider thing. For people who gain wisdom, for people who come close to God and yield their lives to Him, wisdom becomes part of the gift that He gives us. It's an incredible advantage. It's an incredible advantage over people that don't have it. It's an incredible advantage in the living of our human life and the living of our experience to have wisdom over people who don't have it. So as we were conceiving this series, I thought, here's something I love to do. Remember the story about the church visit in the Caribbean and the lovely evening around the dinner table? I thought, let's do this. Let's have a communal component to this. So here's an invitation. If you are 70 or over, we would love to ask you to share some of your wisdom. Send an email, like a sentence of a wisdom insight, to Hope at Hope Central, and we'll begin to gather some of this. If you're 70 or over. Now, if you're 70 or over and you become cranky and you're kind of a curmudgeon, like, don't do it. See, this is why we chose email as the way to receive them. Because we had a sense that this may require some editing. But if you're 70 or over, we'd love to hear from you. Send an insight to Hope at Hope Central, and here's what we want to do. We want to begin to gather these over the weeks of our series, and we're going to place them, and we're going to create a wisdom wall out in the concourse, a place for us to learn from those of you who have considered life with thoughtful wisdom. So we're coming into the new year, and there are a lot of voices telling us what we ought to be doing in order to get the good life. What the Bible is saying is, above anything else, get wisdom through a deeper, intimate relationship with God. Above anything else, make this our resolve, not only at the start of this year, but all the years ahead. Let's pray. Father God in heaven, you are the one who knows everything. You know it through all time. You know all the implications and outcomes. You know all the background. And you know us better than we know ourselves. Would you please forgive us for leaning on our own understanding and thinking too highly of ourselves? And would you help us come to you, Lord, with humility to grow in love with you and the wisdom that comes from you? And for any who are here today, Lord, looking at the start of a new year with a sense of sadness or isolation, I pray, Lord, that you would move by your Spirit and give hope. And this through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. So